Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth in our series on studying the Bible. Today, there are lots of conflicting ideas in the world concerning demons, the devil, and Satan. Now, some believe that it's just another story to scare children, and that it's not real. Others say that there is a supernatural being that has existed throughout all the ages and is the root cause of all the evil in the world today. All the wars, all the hatred, and even the natural disasters. Those that believe in an evil, supernatural being think of a fallen angel cast out of heaven by God. They think of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. They think of a red-skinned monster with a pitchfork that resides in a fiery place called hell or the underworld. Or others think that this being wanders the earth, causing problems and spreading evil amongst men. Now, it would seem that these people take the devil and Satan to be one and the same being, a being that is the polar opposite of God in heaven, with, dare I say, an equal footing. They claim, even by quoting the Bible, that there has always been this battle between good and evil. God is good, and Satan, the devil, is bad. This is a complete misunderstanding of what is recorded in the Holy Scriptures. So let us quickly refresh our minds of a very basic Bible teaching. We believe that the Bible is wholly inspired by God, and therefore cannot contradict itself in any way. Let us take a look at what the prophet Isaiah records for us. This is taken from Isaiah 45, reading from verse 5 to 7, where we read, "I am the Lord, and there is no other. There is no God besides me. I will gird you, though you have not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun to its setting, that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things." Now, by believing in a supernatural power of evil, you are actually saying that there are two gods, that there is a God of good and a God of evil. As we have just read, God himself has said that he is one. So this idea of two supernatural beings instantly goes against true Bible teaching. Therefore, everything comes from the hand of God, both blessings and disaster, for he controls all things. Now, what we will find is, as the title suggests, the concept of demons and the devil and Satan in the Bible are merely symbols, and our aim in this talk is to show these symbols to you. Now, in the Old Testament, we find the book of Job. Job was a faithful man of God. He was upright and blameless, and was greatly blessed in his life. Job had many children, many sheep, cattle, camels, and donkeys. He was a very wealthy man. But disaster struck, and in just one day, he lost absolutely everything. He lost all of his livestock. All of his children died. What a terrible thing to happen. And some people would say that surely this is the work of an evil supernatural being. But did Job, this godly man, blame a supernatural being for all that happened to him? Well, we read these words in Job 1, verse 20. "Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, 'Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.' In all this, Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong." So we see from this verse that even though this great disaster fell on Job, He did not blame an external devil or a Satan. He knew that all blessings and all hardships came from the one God. So in this talk, we are to consider very briefly what the Bible means when the devil and Satan are mentioned. So let us first consider the devil in the Bible. Now, some may ask the question, should we be afraid of the devil? Well, the answer is actually yes, but let us see how the Bible tells us why. Now, the Bible teaches us that evil in the world comes from mankind, following our own desires rather than following God. This evil is called sin. James says in chapter 1, verse 13 of the letter, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me.' But each one is tempted when, by his own evil desire, he is dragged away and enticed." So the Bible shows us that sin, this evil desire of humankind, is connected with the devil. We read in 1 John 3, verse 8, "He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil." So here we see in this verse that this devil has done evil from the very beginning, and that the Son of God, that is Jesus Christ, was to destroy the works of this devil. As we have seen, the work of the devil is sin, and so Jesus will destroy sin, the desires of men and women that are in conflict with God. Adam and Eve first sinned when they desired to eat the fruit in the Garden of Eden. They listened to the serpent and let his ideas influence their minds. So they chose to disobey God's command rather than believe that the fruit would do them no harm, purely because they desired the fruit. So what we see then is that this devil is literally inside us. It is the mindset that rules our human desires, that tempts us to do wrong, to choose to live how we want to live, rather than for the purpose that we were created. The Apostle Paul also talks about his own evil desires that were in his heart. We read in the letter to Romans, chapter 7, verse 16, where the apostle writes, "For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do." And he describes this as sin living within me, and asks, "Who will rescue me from this body of death?" It is this evil mind of the flesh that Jesus will destroy. We are told in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14, "Since the children have flesh and blood, he, Jesus, too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil." Now, as we mentioned earlier, the devil in the Bible is but a symbol. And as we have seen, this symbol relates to the sin of mankind. Now, the word devil comes from the Greek word diablos, which means false, accuser, slanderer, liar. And it is interesting to note that this being a Greek word, this is the language of the New Testament. Any reference to a devil is not, in fact, mentioned in the Old Testament. Instead, we find the word Satan, which we will consider shortly. In fact, the first use of this word in the Bible can be found in Matthew's record, when he talks about the temptations of Jesus. This was the desires of the human flesh in Jesus, tempting him to go against God's will, which he and he alone was able to overcome. And he remained without sin. So we have seen that our human way of thinking has taken the ideas of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The Bible uses the word devil to describe this type of thinking. A false accuser, a liar. The effect is called sin, and the result of sin is death. Sometimes the words are personified, as they are used figuratively to describe a sinful tendencies within us. But generally they are just words and describe enemies or liars in a particular context. The first time we come across this word, as I said, is when Jesus was tempted to disobey. But unlike Adam and Eve, he did not yield to those temptations. The victory over sin was won when Jesus offered a perfect sacrifice at his death. And by doing so, he destroyed that power of sin in the flesh. And if we believe in his work, then we can share in that victory that he won. So what about Satan? Satan, or Satanus in the original text, is this time a Hebrew word that has been transliterated and simply means adversary. Within that translation, we also take it to mean opponent or enemy, or someone who simply gets in the way. Now, unlike the word devil or diabolos in Greek, which is only found in the New Testament, Satan, being a Hebrew word, can be found in both the Old and the New Testaments. And what is interesting is the word Satan can be found in two different forms in the Bible. As it is as Satan in its transliterated form, or translated in our English Bibles as adversary. So why do we still have the original word Satan in some places, rather than the much easier to understand translation into English of adversary? Well, this decision was made by those who originally translated the Bible from its original text, and those that translated it into English especially. It was their decision where they would transliterate and where they would translate. The problem was, and it is no secret, that these translators mostly believed in a supernatural devil. Now, what we have to remember is the original writers of the scriptures were divinely inspired, whereas the translators were not. Therefore, today we have left with their, at times, very unhelpful decisions where they choose to either translate or to transliterate the word. Now, a notable example of this is found in the account of Job's trials. Satan here plays a conspicuous part, and the common English reader thinks of the creature variously denominated the devil, Lucifer, or the Prince of Darkness. However, if the reader simply substitutes the word Satan for adversary, then he or she would read strictly according to the original and escape any possible misunderstanding. But who then was this adversary that proved such a terror to Job? Well, all we know is that his title shows him to be an opponent or an enemy of Job. But what about the calamities and the problems that Job suffered? Surely it was not in the power of a mortal man to control these things. Well, the answer to this is simply that these things were God's doing and not actually the adversaries. We read in Job 1, verses 9 through to 11. So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Stretch out your hand against him." Here the adversary acknowledges that it is God who will bring these calamities upon Jacob and not himself. Now, what we also have to remember is that unlike devil, the word Satan doesn't necessarily have an evil implication, since it can refer to any person or being who deliberately gets in the way of another. Therefore, although the word is sometimes used in a similar context, Satan is quite distinct from the meaning of devil, and to connect the two is a misunderstanding of their meanings. Let's now take a look at some of the times that we find the word Satan in the Bible. Now, the word Satan is used in many contexts, including in places where it's translated adversary, such as we find in 1 Kings 11 verse 14, which reads, "Now the Lord raised up an adversary against Solomon." Now that word adversary in the original is Satanas, or Satan. Now anyone can be a Satan or an adversary to someone. It does not mean it refers to a supernatural being who causes evil, but just to any person who opposes another. For example, God can be Satan, and in fact was described as such. In 2 Samuel 24 verse 1, when it says the Lord moved David against Israel, we find in the comparison record in Chronicles, the word is Satan stood up against Israel, referring to the very same event. Now finally then, we have demon possession and references to unclean spirits, which are considered by some as the agents of the devil. Now in the Bible we find the reference to a demon is but just another symbol. This symbol is for disease and illness, often a mental illness. Therefore, demons and unclean spirits can really be agents of the devil, for it is the sin in us that has brought about the curse upon mankind, and without which there would be no illness or disease in the world. So let us look at 2 examples of when either a demon or an unclean spirit is mentioned. Now these are examples that were attributed to demon possession at the time of Jesus, but are today diagnosed in different terminology, though they involve the same symptoms. Jesus was simply using the vernacular of the times. The first example is found in Matthew 12 verse 22, where we read, Then one was brought to him who was demon-possessed, blind and mute, and he healed him, so that the blind and the mute man both spoke and saw. So here Jesus associates the blindness and the dumbness as demon possession. And we note that the cure was the reinstatement of sight and speech by Jesus. There is no mention here of exorcising a demon. Today, that person would be diagnosed as simply being blind and dumb. The second example is found in Luke 13, verse 11, where we read, And behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over and could in no way raise herself up. And here the language used is that of a spirit of infirmity, and it is the cause of the woman's problem. Again, Jesus healed the woman, and there was no reference to exorcising a spirit. Jesus simply said, Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Today, the diagnosis would simply be arthritis or a similar issue. So again, we see that a concept that has been misunderstood to be physical demons and evil spirits is shown in the Bible to be simply a way of showing the results of sin in the flesh and the result of the curse upon mankind. So today, by a way of summary, we have seen that nowhere in the Bible are we told of an evil supernatural being or a fallen angel that is in personal conflict with God. We have seen that there is one God and creator of mankind, and he is in control of all things. We have seen that the devil is synonymous with sin. The Bible teaches us that sin comes from within us, so we cannot blame a supernatural tempter. We've seen that Satan is just an ordinary word. It is used in the Bible in a literal way for various adversaries. It is also used figuratively to describe sin and sinful desires. Sin is often personified in the Bible. It is talked about as being a deathly adversary. This teaches us to be wary of sin and battle against it. It is our greatest adversary because we all sin and we all die because of it. So what we can learn is that each of us has a devil inside, and each of us can be a Satan. We all dwell apart from God due to the sinfulness of our human nature. And finally, we can only be saved by association with Christ's perfect sacrifice on the cross. Thank you for listening.